Inicjatywa Hand in Hand wraca w tym roku z nową propozycją. Nadal poruszamy się w tematyce współpracy międzysektorowej, jednak w tegorocznej edycji organizatorzy zdecydowali się przedstawić Państwu trochę inne formy wolontariatu, a także poruszyć kwestię dostępności eventów online. Ja nazywam się Aleksander Twardowski i mam przyjemność moją rozmową zainicjować cykl wideo podcastów w ramach tegorocznej edycji Hand in Hand, a rozmawiać będę z Natalie Dunn, menadżerem do spraw partnerstwa z CareerVillage, czyli tematem będzie nowa odsłona wolontariatu kompetencyjnego. Zapraszam. Hello, Natalie. It's great to have you here. Thanks for you accepting the invitation to present to our viewers what is the CareerVillage and what the platform has to offer. It's terrific to have you here. And let's start from the very origins of CareerVillage, if you can tell us why it was established and what's its mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So CareerVillage.org's mission is to democratize access to college and career advice for underserved youth. We were founded in 2011 by Jared Chung, and he was inspired to start the organization based on his experience as a student in the New York City public school system. There he had very little access to college and career advice and counseling in general. When he was in middle school, unfortunately, his family went through bankruptcy. So he knew that he really wanted to get a good job when he was older, but he didn't know exactly what that looked like, and he didn't know where to turn for career advice. He was lucky to find a couple of really great mentors who helped him get to college and find his first job. But like he probably would have been without those mentors, we know that across the world, students really don't have access to personalized career advice. So that's where the origins of CareerVillage came from, and that is really how we started as an organization.
Okay, just out of curiosity, can you tell us how the platform is being operated? I mean, are you a company, NGO, or other kind of organization? How does the CareerVillage team look like? And maybe how do you obtain funds to run your organization?
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit. We run in the US, we're a 501c3 organization, which is like an NGO internationally. Our team is split up into a few different pieces. So we have the engineering and development team, and they are all the coders and software engineers who build the platform and run the technical piece. We have our partnerships team, which is the team that I sit on, and we work with community partners and our corporate partners, which is actually how we get funded. We partner with different companies who support us and support our mission and our operations financially. And we help them with engaging their employees in volunteering and helping with their CSR, their corporate social responsibility initiatives. And the last piece of our team is the community team. And they work with all of our users, professionals, students, and educators to make sure that they are using the platform the best way that they can and that they're getting the most out of CareerVillage.
And what's your target audience? I mean, the website has separate tabs for students, educators, and professionals. So how each of them can benefit from your CareerVillage platform?
Yeah, so I can talk through those three different audience members. Our target beneficiaries are students who don't have access to information or advice elsewhere in their lives. This is primarily students from underserved communities who maybe at school don't have access to counselors or folks in their communities who can help them make their dreams come true. So that's really who we're hoping to be serving using CareerVillage. And we're open to every student though. And student doesn't necessarily mean you're a child or someone who's actively enrolled in school. I think that we acknowledge everyone is a student throughout their lives. Everyone has questions and could use advice. So we're really accessible to anyone who wants some advice about their future or careers. On the professional side, we really are targeting any professional who wants to make an impact and support students. So whether your job is being a podcast host and you can help students understand how to get there, or you work for a big company, or you're an auto mechanic, whatever it is, we know that students all over the world want to understand how to become, what they want to be in the future and learn how to make their dreams a reality. So really any professional who can answer those questions is who we're hoping will be on CareerVillage. We have over 85,000 professionals who have signed up on our platform to give advice. And so we have folks everywhere from tons of different backgrounds, and we just love that diversity of experience to support our students. The last piece is educators. And for educators, it's really anyone who has a group of students, whether it's a classroom, another nonprofit who has some community of students, and they want to support them in getting advice on careervillage.org. So the platform has functionalities for educators or group leaders to assign assignments to students and support them in getting advice on CareerVillage.
Hopefully in the audience of our video podcast, we have students. So this should be a nice tip for those who are looking for some professional guidance and mentoring. But also among our viewers, we should have professionals that might be interested in volunteering with their expertise and experience. So how would you encourage them to start with CareerVillage?
Absolutely. So there's a couple ways that you can get involved with CareerVillage as a professional. You can go on to careervillage.org and just sign up as a professional. It's super easy to get started. It'll only take a few minutes to sign up. And once you've created your account, you'll be able to start giving advice to students everywhere. Our platform is open access, which means that everything that's posted on CareerVillage is public and can be seen and shared with anyone in the CareerVillage community. And we do that for a few reasons. The first is that since everything's public and there's no private communication with students, we can allow folks to volunteer without lengthy background checks and really make it an accessible volunteer opportunity. And we also do it to scale our impact. So just know if you're coming on CareerVillage to volunteer and you support a student by giving them advice, there will be a ton more students who will also read that advice and who may have the same question as the original poster of their question. And so you're really making a wide impact. If you also are interested in expanding CareerVillage in your community, you can become a CareerVillage ambassador. So that would be, you can reach out to our team at hello@careervillage.org, and that's a way to get involved more deeply, connect CareerVillage to local community centers, NGOs, or educators. And if you really wanted to go that extra step and support students in your community. But the first step is just making an account, and then you can give advice from there.
Which leads me to the next question, because your website says you served 190 countries. So at this point, which countries are most active at CareerVillage?
Yeah, so about 60% of our activity is in the US, which is where we're based.
Okay.
But we have a ton of activity all over the world. Like you said, 190 countries. So most of the countries in the world. We have the most activity outside of the US in India, Canada, the Philippines, the UK, and Australia are our next 5 countries that have the most activity. But there's certainly growing activity all over the world, and we hope to see that continue.
And how do you do that? How do you seek those opportunities to expand your audience and professionals base to other countries than American?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 2 pieces to this. One is our students and one's our professionals. I'll start with our professionals because that sometimes can help with our students. So the first way we do this is posting our volunteer opportunities on platforms like LinkedIn and Volunteer Match. And we can do, ads on other places like Facebook and Google AdWords that target specific audiences in specific countries or communities. And that's one way that we can expand to volunteers around the world. We also have an ambassador program, which I mentioned a bit before. We're really excited volunteers. If we have, for example, a group of 2 or 3 volunteers in Poland who really want to get CareerVillage out in their local communities, they'll recruit volunteers that they know, whether it's their work colleagues, their family and friends. They'll encourage them to share the resource. And then importantly, on the student side, they'll partner with local community centers, NGOs, or educators to make sure that CareerVillage is a resource for your students. And this is something that you can be leveraging from anywhere in the world as long as you have internet. So that's a way that we've been able to expand our volunteer base and really expand to students around the world. We also have some partnerships with, international universities and different organizations like that to get the word out for both volunteers and students. And that's something we're always excited about expanding and continuing.
What about language capabilities? Is it English only, or do you do it in local language as well, like Polish maybe? Do you provide kind of a support to students and professionals that would like to communicate in their local language?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the student side, students can post in any language and it will be translated and eventually posted in English. Volunteers can translate questions to be in any language they're most comfortable reading in. But at this point, volunteers do have to post in English, but students can translate those answers and advice to any language that Google Translate supports, which is most languages, and it does include Polish. So we definitely have the capability for students who are speaking any language to ask questions. And for volunteers, we, at this point, ask to post in English, but there is the capability to translate back and forth.
Mm-hmm. I guess we now have a very good idea on the way that CareerVillage works. So coming to an end, my final question is how the practical aspects look like. If we can start from students' perspective, please. A young person who wishes to take advantage of what your platform has to offer, what they should do.
Yeah. So if you're a young person or you know a young person who wants to use careervillage.org, the first step is going to that website, so careervillage.org, and signing up as a student. From there, there's a bunch of things you can do and that you can take advantage of. You can ask questions about any question related to any career, college decision, anything along those lines. And you have a huge community of professionals who are there to support you and answer those questions. You also have access to the huge database of great advice from our professionals on our platform. So you can directly ask questions. You can also just scroll through and search maybe for specific topics you're interested in and find answers and advice that professionals have already given to students. You can also, oh, yeah.
Go on, sorry.
No problem. I was going to say you can also create to-do lists. So a career to-do list on the platform where, for example, if you know you want to be a nurse in Poland, what does that look like? And what steps do I need to take from the time I'm 15 or 20 or however old you are to get to that step? And our professionals can support those career to-do lists by giving advice, adding steps, and suggesting action items for you to get to your goal. So when students ask questions, they'll put hashtags for the topics that the questions are related to. And that's what we use to match student questions to professionals who might be able to answer those questions. So there's a number of ways that these questions get to professionals. The first is through their email. So when we, on CareerVillage, when the algorithm finds questions that are related to specific professionals, the professionals will get maybe a weekly digest of those questions, depending on their settings, how often they'd like to receive an email. There's 10 students on CareerVillage who are seeking your advice, and they'll have a list of those questions which are relevant to them. There's also just the relevant feed, which professionals, whenever they want to volunteer, can head to careervillage.org and look on their feed, and they'll see questions that should be relevant to them. They also can search for questions that they'd like to answer based on specific topics, but those are a few of the ways that professionals are able to answer students' questions.
What about professionals? Because sounds like CareerVillage is a great place for professionals to contribute and to share their knowledge, coach and mentor students or graduates to support their career path choices and challenges. So how those professionals may get involved?
Absolutely. So same first step, which is go on to careervillage.org and you'll sign up. But in this case, you'll sign up as a professional. And from there, you are all set to start giving advice. So like I mentioned, you can search through the relevant feed. You can use the search bar for specific topics that you'd like to give advice in. And then once you see questions, the first step is just typing. So we recommend that our professionals give really thoughtful answers to our students. Our students start at age 13. So some of them are quite young. So we always want to make sure that we're really supportive and striking the right tone. But as long as you have an account and you have experience to share, students could use your expertise, and that's really how you can get started.
Great stuff. Natalie, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for that conversation. And I wish you and your colleagues further success with the CareerVillage platform, so the numbers you present are even more impressive than now. All the best for you. Thank you for being here with us and for all the answers.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Drodzy Państwo, podziękowania również dla Was za wysłuchanie naszego podcastu i w tym miejscu w imieniu swoim, jak również organizatorów, no i oczywiście Natalii i jej zespołu, zapraszam serdecznie do odwiedzenia strony CareerVillage. Jak mieliście okazję usłyszeć podczas wcześniejszej rozmowy, to jest nie tylko miejsce, gdzie studenci mogą uzyskać bezcenne porady, które ułatwią im start w karierze zawodowej, ale to jest również ciekawa i lokalnie nowa inicjatywa i alternatywa dla wolontariatu kompetencyjnego, a w dzisiejszej dobie również o tyle wygodna, że może odbywać się zdalnie. Serdecznie zapraszam.